Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Coming up on today's show, ahead of the general election, Britain's opposition Labour Party has increased its poll lead over Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's Conservatives. This is according to the first official poll following last week's local elections, which was a disaster for the government. Our Downing Street correspondent Simon Pusey will shortly be joining me here in the studio for an update. And counting is still underway in Chad for a presidential election intended to mark the end of 3 years of military rule. Africa analyst Tamzane Kajo will shortly be joining me here in the studio for his assessment on this all-important ballot. Then later, as the Lagos state government doubles down on its plans to demolish buildings without approvals across the mega city, one property firm is doing its best to alleviate the fears of potential investors across the diaspora. Adetola Nola, the CEO of Veritasi Homes and Properties, will be joining me from Lagos for more. But first, on Tuesday, the UK, alongside the US and Australia, sanctioned a senior Russia-based leader of Lockbit, once one of the world's most infamous cybercrime gangs. The sanctions target Russian national Dmitry Khrushchev, who has been identified as one of the leaders of the ransomware group, responsible for extorting over $1 billion from thousands of victims globally. Earlier in the year, the National Crime Agency announced that it had infiltrated the group's network and taken control of its services, compromising the entire criminal enterprise. Khrushchev will now be subject to a series of asset freezes and travel bans. In other news, Nadhim Zahawi, the former Chancellor, has become the 64th Conservative MP to announce he is standing down at the general election. The former businessman, 56, said it was time for a new, energetic Conservative to replace him. The news came less than 24 hours after Natalie Elphicke, who represents the Dover constituency on the south coast of England, defected to the opposition Labour Party on Wednesday, moments before Rishi Sunak made his weekly appearance at Prime Minister's Questions in Parliament. Sunak's Conservatives trail Labour by about 20 points in opinion polls ahead of a national election expected in the coming months. Well, for more on this, I was earlier joined in the studio by our Downing Street correspondent, Simon Pusey. Simon, to say that Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, has had a bad couple of days is pretty much an understatement. We've got British political hacks saying we're witnessing the death of the Tory party as we know it. More defections this week, of course, because of their victory last week. We've got the Labour Party calling for an immediate general election. Talk to me about what's been going on.
Yeah, and it's quite confusing because we see a lot of these defections over the last couple of weeks, and I think there is a bit of a kind of momentum building here, isn't there? If you're kind of considering it and you see another colleague of yours go to the other side, you think, well, maybe now's the time. We did have those local elections. They were very strong in terms of Labour. Yeah. It wasn't a complete landslide, so if you look at that in a general election sense, which isn't entirely accurate, but they don't even have a majority Labour. They don't have it would be a hung parliament. But let's talk about some of these defections. So we've recently had Nadhim Zahawi. Yeah. He's not defected, but he says he's going to stand down. He's one of a number of people. Yeah, exactly. A minister. But everyone's really talking about Mrs. Elphicke, who's defected to Labour. So Prime Minister's Questions, they'd obviously been working on this. They've been speaking about it for a couple of weeks.
Very well choreographed.
Exactly, yeah. She walks in and goes over and sits on the other side. And that's, obviously the optics of that don't look great. And then you look at her and she's a classic Tory. You look at some
very
policies, very right wing. Also, I think the fact that where her seat is, Dover, that is where all the small boat crossings are kind of being targeted and stuff. So that doesn't look good for Rishi Sunak on his flagship policy that he bangs on about at any opportunity. And it doesn't necessarily look good for. On one side it does, he's persuading sort of opposition candidates to come across, even staunch Conservative ones. But then I think that will come back to bite the Labour in the future. Some of the things that she said or stood for in the past, you can't change your colours that dramatically, that quickly. But I think on the face of it, and she's going to stand down anyway at the next general election. So it's not like she's going to fight her seat. But yeah, the 39th MP, she became the 39th MP to change party allegiance during a parliamentary term. Most of those Conservatives, it's not all people moving to Labour. Some of them have been let go for various disciplinary reasons. Some have joined Reform, some have joined other parties or become independents. But yeah, she's the latest. And Dan Poulter, literally, a week, 10 days ago, a doctor who joined Labour, saying the Conservatives have become a nationalist party of the right that had abandoned compassion and no longer prioritises the NHS. He was talking about how he did 17 night shifts in a row, and he felt that, and I think a lot of these people are covering their backs. They want to be on the right side of history. They know they're going to lose the general election. They want to get out, before it's too late. Yeah. So they're all coming out with all these excuses about why they've now suddenly decided. And you've had Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, you've had, so many Conservative
Theresa
May, people, you could have done this at any point. But anyway, now suddenly they're deciding to do it. And I don't think this is going to be the last that we see going across to Labour. But then you're right, you look at the Labour Party and you think, how broad a church are you that you can't even see the other end of the spectrum, when you've got someone like Ms. Elphickle going in and she's sitting alongside people who literally despise her because of the things she said. So it's going to be quite hard to keep, that party unified when there's so many different thoughts there. But I think, as you say, another bad few days for Rishi Sunak.
How's he faring?
Well, I mean, we sit here every week talking about when's this election going to come. If they were to hold an election now, it's turkeys voting for Christmas, isn't it? So I think they'll just leave it to the last possible moment, November, December, January. But yeah, it's going to keep coming up. This is going to keep cropping up for Rishi Sunak, and you can't see where any respite's going to come from, can you? Because there's going to be more and more by-elections as more people leave. They're going to lose them.
But a week is a long time in politics, especially in Downing Street. Thanks so much, Simon. Chadian presidential candidate Success Masra's party has condemned violence against him and his supporters as counting continues following Monday's election. Masra, a former fierce opponent of the regime before being named prime minister, is the main challenger to junta leader Mohamed Idris Deby. International rights groups have warned that the vote was not expected to be free or fair amid a crackdown of the opposition. For further analysis, I was earlier joined in the studio by Africa analyst Tamzan Kajo. Tamzan Kajo, always a pleasure. Who else can talk to a Nigerian audience about what's happening in Africa? Very busy year for elections. We've got one taking place in Chad at the moment, although official results not expected in a couple of weeks. However, all of the observers, particularly those in the West, are saying that military ruler Mohamed Deby will win. Why are they keeping such a close eye on what's taking place in that region?
I think, first of all, thank you for having me, Juliana, and thank you for your input and to the viewers, especially in Nigeria as well. Chad is very important, firstly because it's part of a number of security arrangements within Africa, in the Sahel, as well as with Nigeria and Cameroon when it comes to what's happening in the basin and the fight against Boko Haram and the fight against all others that are considered terrorist organizations in the area. So the outcome of the election is very important, but also it's important because they changed their constitution. And people want to see how that's going to work. Is Deby Jr., I'll call him Junior because his father was, they share the same name. Is he going to accommodate a lot of these people who are in the opposition and the fringes?
The minorities.
Especially, not so much of minority, but those that already have access to power. Because you will see that a number of presidential candidates were already ministers.
Yes.
You've got people like Lidi, Minister of Education. You've got Masra, who is Prime Minister and stayed in America and very close to England or the UK and the Americans. So it's that proximity to the policies within the region and where countries can realign. Should France realign? Is the UK, the Americans, is Nigeria going to be realigning depending on the outcome of the elections?
Absolutely. We're still waiting to hear from the presidency on that. You mentioned Masra, really important. Of course, he is the prime minister and a presidential candidate. He on Wednesday condemned violence and threats against him and his supporters. He's alleging electoral fraud. Pretty serious allegations.
Pretty serious, but it
verified.
Well, there's no, even remember Rumsfeld when he was talking about the elections in Middle East, even when you look at the American elections, they are coming in November. The UK, they might have the elections in October. There is no election in the world that can be said to be
completely
top
free
class.
and fair.
But for opposition people in particular, it might sound like a broken record because the expectation is when you have access to power, you must be seen to be in control. Whether the elections are free and fair is another issue. You must be able to compete in that terrain. Look what happened to Nigeria. There were many court cases afterwards with Peter Obi, with
went to the Supreme Court. They ruled in favor of the president.
So it really doesn't. There is no one who is ever going to be satisfied with an election. But the encouragement to African leaders, both in opposition and in government, is to say, let's accept the outcome of an election. Let's do the best that we can. And then let's make sure that the national interest goes beyond party, political, and individual candidate interests.
You're talking about national interest. The vote coincides with a temporary withdrawal of US troops from Chad at a time when the wider region is being courted by Russia. How do you see this playing out? Nigeria have been involved in that discussion.
Well, it's the geopolitics, isn't it?
It is.
And it is probably Chad trying to make sure that everything. Remember, they started withdrawing at the time there were political problems in Chad, and that was before people like Masra. Remember those incidents? Masra ran away. He went to the United States, and then afterwards. There appeared to be, some reconciliation between the groups. Masra came back, he became the prime minister. There were, a lot of talks that were, convened by regional leaders. So I foresee a scenario where most of these, whether it's Americans or French or the Russians, will negotiate their presence for different reasons. And I think ECOWAS and the Central African regional body will need to take a lead in that.
You spend a lot of time on the continent. You have your ears on the ground everywhere. What do the people of Chad want? What would be their favourable outcome?
The people of Chad want what everybody else wants: a way out of poverty, access to jobs. The youth, when you look at, the candidates that are pushing for the youth, they want self-determination. So what they want is a country that works. What you have had in Chad in the most, is a country that has got oil. It's a country that is rich, but that wealth is not necessarily going to the next person
Heard that before,
on the chain. So it's the same. As what you would have, but they also want stability and peace. So you are having to balance the military aspect of, because Chad has got one of the probably strongest armies in the region. When you look at maybe Nigeria and others, but Chad is one of those that militarily is very, very strong. So
how?
I think it's the years and years of fighting, and probably remember people like Idris Deby, the senior. He was a military man. He'd been there for a long, long time, 3 decades, I think, since the current president was probably, 6 years old. So it's a country that is almost always from the
Genesis.
times. Yeah, they have almost always relied on the army and the military, and most of the people that come to leadership will be coming through the military. So they're very, very strong. So I think stability, the economics need to work, jobs for the young people. They must not see France as their destination, as their country of dreams, their journey to way out of poverty. They must be able to get what they want in Chad itself, but a safe Chad for that.
Here, not just a safe Chad, a safe region, a safe Africa. It's always fascinating learning from your insights. Tamzan Kajo, who of course is an Africa analyst, thanks so much for your time today. Coming up on Channel's Business Global, as the Lagos state government doubles down on its plans to demolish buildings without approvals across the mega city, one property firm is doing its best to alleviate the fears of potential investors across the diaspora. Adetola Nola, the CEO of Veritasi Homes and Properties, will be joining me from Lagos for more, and Prince Afolabi Andu, founder of the Nigerian Global Business Forum, joins me from here in the capital with an update on the inaugural Nigerian Millennials Tech Ignited Conference. All of this after the break. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. For several weeks, the Lagos state government has been demolishing homes which, according to them, were built without approvals. The episode has raised fears across the diaspora about the safety of investing in real estate back home, which is one of the reasons why my next guest is gathering Nigerians living in the UK as part of efforts to alleviate fears. For more on this, I'm now being joined by Adetola Nola, CEO of Veritasi Homes and Properties Limited. How are you and your team going to convince people living in London that it is actually safe and potentially lucrative to invest in real estate back home?
Nigeria is one of the best places to own properties. And I'll say this, right? As a serial investor that I am, I have invested in the UK, I have invested in the UAE, I've invested in Nigeria, and then I think that, when it's time to convert solid assets to liquid, which is one of the reasons why people invest in properties to hold all of these values. And whenever they want to get into the liquid state, they quickly try to put their property on sale. But if you put a property on sale in Nigeria and the UAE and the UK at the same time, and then the one in Nigeria will sell faster. And I know this because I've done it quite a lot of time. And then, for diasporans, because of especially what is happening now, the Naira losing a lot of value against the pounds, against the USD, we think that is a very good time to buy because you can then do more or acquire more with your pounds or with your dollars that you've earned. And then I think that one of the things that a lot of people don't do is they don't consult a property expert like Veritasi Homes before then going on the journey of acquiring properties. There's been a lot of demolitions, a lot of drainage problem recently in Nigeria. But none of our properties or none of our clients that we've advised, even when they bought from us or bought from any other person, developers that we told them to buy from, have been affected. So I think that people should again listen and find a very trusted advisor. That not just a developer to put them through, and obviously a legal person to take them through that process of acquiring properties.
Affordable housing, everybody wants that, whether you're in Lagos or in London. But some of the concerns that we're hearing from Lagosians and from those in the diaspora is that Lagos, Abuja, some of these cities now are totally unaffordable, even with good schemes such as the ones that you're putting forward. Is this a concern for your business?
It's one of the things that I've always said, that if we're going to solve the problem of affordable housing, because lands are not affordable in Nigeria, especially when you mention the island or the close proximities on the mainland in Nigeria, lands are very expensive, and this cost, even cost of building materials. If you are going to take debt to finance the project, the cost of money now in Nigeria is unbearable, and this cost have to be transferred to the clients, to the consumers. So there needs to be some form of intervention from the government or some form of partnership when the government comes in and say, look, this land, or take this land, just bring your money for construction, and then take this money at single digit interest rate and do all of this and solve all of this problem. The investment scenario in Nigeria right now favors Nigerians living in diaspora because obviously strong USD and strong pounds against the Naira. And then secondly, the properties are a bit cheaper now because there's a lot of supply and not a lot of demand as well. But again, the most important part is to do your due diligence very well. And then how do you do your due diligence is by appointing, a solicitor that's a property solicitor, not just a litigator or someone that does the capital market transaction.
Really fascinating speaking with you. Really dicey times. Hopefully you can calm the nerves in the diaspora this weekend, you and your team. Adetola Nola, who is the CEO of Veritasi Homes and Properties PLC, which, as I said, was recently recognized in the Financial Times as being one of the fastest growing African companies, a massive achievement. Thank you so much for your time and expertise today.
Juliana, thank you so much.
Adetola's full interview will be available online after the show. Now to my final story. Last month, hundreds of young budding entrepreneurs gathered at the University of Ibadan for the inaugural Nigerian Millennial Tech Ignited Conference for an insightful day of mentorship and networking. Prince Afolabi Andu, the convener of the event, joins me now from the British capital for further insight. Prince Afolabi Andu, it's always a pleasure having you on Channels Business Global. Please talk to me about the inaugural Nigerian Millennials Tech Ignited Conference. What did you set out to achieve, and did you manage to achieve it?
Thanks very much, Juliana. Thanks for having me on Channels. It's always a great pleasure. But before I go into that, I think it's important to establish some fundamental facts with regards to where we are at as a country in terms of technology, more so regarding startups. You know, we are at a crossroads in terms of technological advancement. Nigeria is a burgeoning hub for innovation with a unique position in the global tech ecosystem. The country boasts the largest tech market in Africa. It's valued at about 9.6 billion in 2022 and projected to reach about 18.8 billion by 2027. So these are very significant figures that I think it's important for us to take note of. But moreover, Nigeria's tech startup ecosystem witnessed exceptional growth, attracting about 1.1 billion in funding in 2022, a 68% increase from the previous year. And we do have about 200 active tech hubs and co-working space, the highest concentration in Africa. So we have a solid foundation to build on. And this itself, you know, when you look at those figures, is an indicator of what potential Nigeria do possess in regards to technological advancement. So for us, it's a no-brainer. It's just something that needs to be put in place, particularly for the median age group, that when we do a projection over the next 25 years, if you would do an average right now, say between the age of 18 and 25, a lot of them would just be in their early 50s or just turning 50. And you can imagine what that will be for the country in terms of our power base, in terms of our respectability, in terms of our advancement, in terms of technology, ultimately. So the Nigerian Millennium Tech Ignited Conference is a startup. It's actually a trigger point of what we intend to do. It's just the beginning of what we intend to do. And as the word ignite states, the idea is to ignite technology across the country. And that's the main mission.
Prince Afolabi, thank you for that broad overview. Very important for our viewers, of course, to know where Nigeria sits in its tech evolution, shall we call it. Another evolution that's happening, not just in Nigeria, but across the world, of course, is artificial intelligence.
Only 4% of our youths currently possess digital skills, and a mere 16% of our tertiary graduates have expertise in, emerging technologies like AI, which you just pointed on now. If we don't focus on that expansion, we will get ourselves in troubled waters in the future. We know what goes on globally as we speak today. The significant advancement that is being embarked on, particularly in the robotics AI space of technology. And if Nigeria does not get on that band right now, it really would create a lot of challenge in terms of the disparity that will be in existence. So for a lot of the young ones, it's not a case of AI as a tool for just pleasurable benefits. No, it's for economic, it's for governance. It's key, particularly in the 21st century that we are in now. And for them to be relevant, for them to be competitive, absolutely crucial that they get on that particular pathway.
Oh, I did see lots of pictures on social media. You seem to be very much trending across WhatsApp platforms a couple of weeks ago when the event took place, and we look forward to hearing about more from the Ignited conference. Prince Afolabi Andu, who wears many hats, but today I refer to you as the founder of the Nigerian Global Business Forum and, of course, the chairman of the Global Africa Investments Limited. Thank you so much for your time and expertise today, sir.
Thank you very much, Juliana.
The full interview with Prince Afolabi will be available online after the show. Sadly, that's all we have time for today. But as always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channels Business Global. Goodbye.